When you are raised by a narcissist, how does this impact you? Well, you guys, not only am I the child of a narcissist, but I've been reading up on this, studying and specializing in the subject for 12 years. And I deal with specifically this clientele. And I've had thousands of clients, both here in Brazil and internationally. And I've summarized some of the biggest wounds, the biggest problems that I've seen these adult grown children of narcissists dealing with. So without further ado, let's get started with our list. So I guess the number one thing that we can say about children of narcissists is that they have learned how not to be themselves. When you grow around people who are threatened by your individuality, because your individuality means they can't control you, then they're going to do everything in their power to squash that individuality. And this is going to start at a very, very young age. You're going to have memories, if you do have memories that far back, of being treated with narcissistic abuse when you were like 3 years old, 4 or 5 years old. And what happens is the child notices that when they are being themselves, when they're being spontaneous, they're not really met necessarily with the love and acceptance and validation that they want. And it's hard to make sense of that when you're a child, because when you're a kid, literally your utmost goal in life is to be loved and validated by your parents. This is more important than food or anything else even. When you are giving of yourself to your parents, you're giving them your expression, your opinions, your preferences, your needs. You're expressing all of these things that are part of you, and then those things are met with like, that's not supposed to be like that. As a child, you literally can't make sense of that. You're not going to be like, well, I guess my parents are narcissistic and they are unable to appreciate my individuality. You're going to be like, well, damn, I guess my parents don't love me because I must be unlovable. And when you think that you are unlovable, what you end up doing is that you will start noticing that these parts of yourself aren't welcome, and you will start to dissociate yourself from parts of yourself. And you're going to let that shine of yours become subdued, and that energy of yours kind of die out, and that passion of yours go gray and lifeless. And all of these parts of you that are beautiful, but that for whatever reason your narcissistic parents cannot deal with, you learn how to switch them off. Hey guys, if you're getting any value from this video, then download your free PDF, Break the Chains, 10 Steps to Stop Your Narcissistic Parents' Control. You can find the link in the description box. And that's the one thing that we can say about children of narcissists. They have learned to put on a show of a false self. They will invest in a false self, in the sense that they will cut off parts of their personality that were not accepted with love by their parents, and they will become this deficient little distorted version of a human being that feels this emptiness inside because we are cut off from our own light and from ourselves. So that's the number one thing. So how does this learning how to reject your true self thing happen? Well, in all sorts of ways. You tell your dad that you want to follow a certain career, and he kind of wished that he could have been a lawyer, but for whatever reason he wasn't. So now you need to be a lawyer because he'll live vicariously through you. So don't you dare be independent. I can't accept your true self. No, you need to like law. Or it can show up in something like that. It can show up in your joy even. Narcissists are very envious of other people because they feel so inept. Like deep down inside, they feel so inept that if you're too joyful, you're too energetic and happy, this might be a threat to them somehow, because it reminds them of how they don't know how to access positive emotions with any sort of regularity or with any sort of intensity or duration that would actually make a difference in their lives. So you find yourself kind of subduing your own joy because you can't share it with the person, particularly if they're always like grumpy or sad and depressed or whatever. You will soon learn to switch off that wonderful joy that you were born with. Another way is if you're sad, if you're angry, if you're mad. Narcissistic parents might not have the tools to deal with your heavy emotions, and they might say that you're weak or you're dumb or I don't know, there's something just inherently wrong with you, because why the heck would you feel these things? You're not allowed to feel those things. In many narcissistic families, heavy emotions were just like not dealt with. So when we grow up and we feel these things like anger or loneliness or sadness or whatever, we literally don't know what to do with these things because they were rejected in us. We reject them in ourselves as well. Another way that you learn how to reject your true self is when you demonstrate preferences in your clothes, your choice of language, what you eat, anything at all, really, your likes and dislikes. They might kind of piss off your narcissistic parents for whatever reason. And you will soon find that you can't make your parents happy through your essence and through your characteristics. So you better not let that essence show through. So yeah, this is how we start rejecting ourselves, because we become hesitant about expressing what was inside us. And then in the adult phase, we don't take our dreams seriously. We second guess our perception of things. We don't really know what we want because we don't really know if we're allowed to want that thing, or we're going to get punished for wanting that thing. And it's hard for us to find our own voice because all of these other voices pop up in our minds, which are like introjects of our parents and other people that are speaking over our own voice and are kind of telling us what to think and do. And so we're in this constant mental war of rejecting what is ours and not really knowing how to differentiate between the voices that are ours and voices that are other people's. Another sign that you were raised by narcissistic parents, and which is connected to the first thing I just said, if you reject your true self, you think that your true self isn't good enough. So the whole thing about feeling inadequate, well, that's a hallmark for children of narcissists. Even the children of narcissists who are wildly successful will often feel inadequate or will have imposter syndrome because the way they feel inside, the emptiness of not having been validated as they were growing up, it's still there. And they can't make sense of why it's still there with all this outwardly success. Why doesn't anything fill up this void? You might not have success either. You might go the other way where you just don't believe in yourself at all. But you feel so inadequate that you don't even take steps, right? And again, I think it's really important for us to remember that for a child, it is biologically necessary and it is inbuilt in the child's biology, this need to be loved. Because if parents and children don't bond, then the parents will abandon their children and the children are obviously helpless. I mean, how's a kid going to defend themselves? We're not like horses where we're born and an hour later, immediately we go off walking, right? So the need for love that humans have, the love of their parents, is a biological thing that attaches them to their parents for long enough time so that they can grow up and become individuals. And when we never actually get satisfied, like we get food, we get a roof over our head, maybe the abuse isn't so overt, it's kind of subtle, we can't put our finger on it, but our primary need has been ignored or rejected, our need for love and bonding, and this creates frustration. Frustration is oftentimes a result of trying to get love from a very young age and not being able to. And what you're left with is a big inner void. So the whole not feeling good enough might show up as the whole inner void, as you feeling like you are an alien. Wherever you go, you feel like you're broken. Other human beings seem to have all their parts and they seem to know how to do normal things. And why the heck don't I? And I'm an adult, but I feel like an adult in a child's body. And we might feel inherently broken, or like there's parts of us that are missing, like we're not actually whole. Where am I? Do I exist? Am I alive? This feeling of being inadequate, it eats away at your soul and it will have you convinced that you are worthless. And really the feeling is just an echo of that very common sensation you felt so routinely throughout your childhood, an echo of that frustration of wanting love that you couldn't have. And it just keeps echoing inside you in your adult phase, and it hurts so much. So that's one sign that you were raised by narcissists. Another sign that you were raised by narcissists is that you experience tremendous amount of guilt. Guilt is definitely used as a tool of choice by narcissists to control their victims, particularly narcissistic parents. It's so easy to make children feel like they didn't live up to your expectations of them, and to make children feel like if you're unhappy, if you're dissatisfied, if you feel empty, if you feel like this huge loser, this loser who wasn't able to do anything with their lives, then it's easy to make your children feel like they are somehow guilty for your unhappiness, because they can't make you happy and it's somehow their fault. And kids will definitely take it upon themselves to make mom and dad happy. And when they don't, they do believe it's their fault. And right, narcissists cannot be pleased. So there's nothing the child can do to feel a little bit better about herself, because if I can please mommy and daddy, it means that I'm inherently good. If I'm good, then I'm worthy of love, and that's all I want. And yeah, well, if you guilt trip your children and make them responsible for you and responsible for your mental health and your happiness, then it's easy to never set them free that way, because the adult grown children of narcissists are still working on that biological premise where they desperately trying to get that love that they've been trying to get since they were babies, and they still haven't been able to do it. And the guilt tripping keeps them in check, right? It's your fault. You're not good enough. That's why you're not loved. It's your fault. You're not good enough, and that's why you're not loved. And it just keeps them in these endless cycles of abuse. Another sign that you were raised by a narcissist: you are either risk averse or you are too risky. I mean, you take too many risks because you don't have any sort of love for yourself. I'm talking about borderline and sociopathic profiles of people who really don't give a damn about their own well-being, and they will subject themselves to all sorts of quite abusive and destructive situations. So you can go down this one lane where you will charge right into risk, even if it's going to harm you, or you can be also very risk averse, or you can kind of do both things at the same time, where you will kind of self-mutilate in a bunch of weird ways, but you will not take risks when it comes to important things like your dreams, or convincing yourself that it makes sense to let go of this toxic relationship you're in so that you can invest in a healthier one in the future. Children of narcissists will not take risks in the name of their own dreams, because they don't take themselves seriously, right? Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. They don't take themselves seriously. And when you treat them as a therapist, you can see that they're like shaking with fear. They're trembling. They're terrified that they might take a wrong step. And it's this whole process where you have to convince them that, hey, life is just this ongoing experiment. You can just test stuff out. I'm not going to punish you. No one's going to punish you if you make a mistake, if you slip or something. And it's this whole process where, they have to learn that taking risk is fun and experimenting with things is fun, and that there isn't this horrible abuse and rejection just around the corner because they're doing something they shouldn't, right? So narcissists can be risk averse, or they can be self-destructive risk takers as well. Narcissistic, not narcissists, children of narcissists. Children of narcissists will also have difficulty in recognizing and processing their emotions. Now, there's all sorts of crafty things that our brain does to help us deal with emotions that are just too much for our child mind to be able to process. And it can go in all sorts of different directions. So your mind can come up with a schizoid adaptation, for example. And that means that basically somewhere along your childhood or your adolescence, you looked around and you're like, what the heck? The world is really not a safe space. You know what? I'm just not going to exist in it. And so your mind tries to protect you from the world by dulling your senses and your emotional reactions. And many people with schizoid adaptations will not be able to feel physically present in their physical body. And they will not be able to have emotional reactions to a number of things. It's like throughout the years, they start feeling dead inside, and there's no joy for anything, and there's no reaction to anything, and they can't bond with anyone, and their psychic energy is never externalized and never attaches to anything outside of themselves. And they have like these fantasy relationships and fantasy happenings in their minds, and they're satisfied with that because it's safe in their minds and it's not safe to be out in the world. And so this is one way that narcissistic abuse will mess up your ability to feel your emotions. Another way that it will do this is by creating a borderline defense, a borderline adaptation, which is kind of like the opposite of the schizoid adaptation. Whereas in the schizoid adaptation, you don't feel much and you're cut off from yourself and you feel dead inside. In the borderline adaptation, you might feel empty inside, but the thing is you feel everything else way too much. and you're completely all over the place with your emotions, and you don't know how to regulate them, and they take over you, and it's too strong, and you don't know how to get back to baseline, and you never get back to baseline. So there's that borderline adaptation as well, where the world in reality is just too much for you, and you're just feeling all the time. And then we also have people who have somatic responses or delayed responses. By somatic responses, I mean that they will not be able to understand any of their emotional world, but they will actually manifest physical symptoms of illness. And it's because they're dissociated from their body, and they don't actually process all of that content, so it comes out physically. And for some other people, me included, what we will have are delayed emotional reactions. So I mean like delayed emotional reactions, where in the moment, you don't really react to things that are happening, and like a couple hours later or weeks later or months later or even years later, out of nowhere, you have a flashback, and you will actually have the first emotional reaction to the event, because your mind couldn't deal with it. So it puts that little reaction in a little capsule, and at some point in the future, it's like, okay, you can deal with this now. And then you'll have to deal with that reaction then and there. So there's all sorts of difficulties in processing, identifying, regulating your emotions, like the ones that I've just described. Another sign that you were raised by narcissists is that you have very weird ways of getting love and validation. So we can go in all sorts of different directions here. You can learn how to get validated for being self-effacing and a martyr and self-sacrificing. So you go down the codependent route, where you think you're only worthy of love if you're giving more than you are receiving in a relationship. You can find a weird way of getting validation by taking the narcissistic route, which can happen in different ways. It can happen through grandiose narcissism, covert narcissism, or even just garden variety perfectionism. What I mean is, because you don't feel that love is available to you, you might either invest in being perfect. So you're like that maybe career-oriented person who has lots of success, but feels empty inside. You know what I mean? So you're doing all of these things that look good on paper, and other people seem to be applauding you, but you're confusing that validation with what you actually need, which is like your own love, so you can fill up that void that's been there forever, and then you can choose healthy relationships that can also fill up that void. And you don't know that that's what you're needing. You think you need validation. So you do all of these things that look good on paper, but that don't nurture you. Or you might actually become openly narcissistic, like a grandiose narcissist, where you will create this false self where you're just so much better than everyone else, and this is the way that you feel validated. And then you have to constantly put other people down and compare yourself, and you're hyper sensitive to criticism, and you're seeing threats where there aren't any, but you're gonna invest in this whole "I'm better than everyone" stance, because that's how you get validated. And then of course you can also take the covert narcissism route, which means basically you become the big victim. And being in the victim role, being like in the world has been unfair to me role, is a way of getting validation. People will be like, "Oh, I pity you. Oh, damn, I guess I can't say no to you then because you're really suffering." And these are weird ways of getting validation. And yet, children of narcissists, some of them will go down that route. Another way of getting, a weird way of getting love or validation is through limerence. So limerence is basically like an obsession you can have with someone that can be romantic or non-romantic, but you get obsessed with this person in your mind, and you start having all these fantasies with the person where you like have a relationship in your mind. It could be sexual, it could not be sexual, and you have this deep desire for reciprocity. You really want the person to love you back. You're just looking for that long lost love. But the thing with limerence is, oftentimes you don't even know the person. It could be like a celebrity. It could be you could be doing like a kind of a stalker thing, or it could be, I don't know, someone from some sort of course that you're taking, but that you don't really have any contact with, or someone who's unavailable because they're in a relationship. So what you do is you create this fantasy bubble where you're obsessed with this person. You're obsessed actually with an avatar of a real person, and you have a relationship with the avatar in your mind, but then you confuse that with reality, and you start thinking that the real person needs to be reciprocal in that love. And you might even overstep boundaries because you're getting your fantasy mixed up with reality, and the real person doesn't know that you're having like all of these wild, passionate encounters in your mind through your limerence, right? And this is something that many children of narcissists will be left with, limerence. They don't think love is available. They're stuck in whatever weird situation they're at. So why not just create this fantasy bubble where I can be obsessed with someone in this fantasy bubble and feel kind of like maybe there's a love dynamic there going on? Another characteristic of children of narcissists is reality distortion. Okay, guys. So I love something that Dr. Romani said about this. She said, when gaslighting is the first language that you were taught, it's kind of hard to differentiate reality from distortion, right? And when we have narcissistic parents, because they can never admit to any wrongdoing, there's always this constant rewriting of reality where lies are just thrown all over the place in such a way that the family looks good or the narcissist looks good, and it's the problems are always external or somebody else's. So what I'm trying to say here with reality distortion is that if you came from a narcissistic family, you lied to yourself a lot because you needed to. You needed to pretend that your family was okay, that love was possible, that maybe things were going to change. Yet you even needed to believe that you were the problem, because so long as you are the horrible, guilty person, at least if you can work on yourself, maybe in the future mom will love you or dad will love you. So even holding on to our guilt and feeling like we are the problem in our family is a reality distortion, because it's really just a way of not accepting that the person is a narcissist and that it was never about us and that there's nothing that we can do. Doesn't matter how much we change, you're going to keep being that way, right? So reality distortion is just part and parcel in all of these narcissistic relationships. And in the adult phase, it will show up as magical thinking, splitting, and weird beliefs that you might have that honestly only a helpless child would come up with. And that's literally where your beliefs came from periods throughout your childhood and your teens and your youth where you couldn't think any more intelligently because you were young, you know what I mean? But you needed to interpret reality in some way. So for example, you might think, for example, that it's your responsibility to save your family and to make your mom or your dad happy. And this is reality distortion, because there are things you control and there are things you don't control. And then I have clients who are like 60 freaking years old and they are still trying to make 80 something, 90 something year old mom happy. And they know they can't. They know it's impossible. But this weird distorted belief that has been in their mind since they were kids is just like keeping them in that weird, uncomfortable position where they keep trying and they keep trying and they keep trying because of the distorted thinking that they are responsible and it is possible for them to make mom or dad happy. Another way reality distortion happens is through splitting. Now, splitting is something that happens for many people who suffer trauma, and it's kind of an extreme polarized black and white thinking sort of thing. So it's kind of like when the person comes to very extreme conclusions about reality, and when they kind of alternate between polarized positions. So at one moment, like a career can be the best thing ever. Oh God, I'm so happy that I made this decision. I'm at this job. The team is great. My colleagues are perfect. The company's perfect. Everything's perfect. And then something happens and all of a sudden, this is the worst place I've ever lived at. Oh, everybody hates me there. Everyone is trying to sabotage me. So you can see like the person went from like everything is great, everything is wonderful to nothing works, everything is terrible. And this happens in other areas as well. Like when people come to conclusions, to extreme conclusions such as no one will ever love me. I will never become financially independent. It's absolutely impossible for me to find a career. This is splitting because it's a very extreme interpretation of reality that has no basis in reality. So splitting, which is this extreme thinking, happens to lots of children of narcissists who distort reality. And again, there are the weird beliefs that I talked about, like the weird beliefs that only helpless children would come up with, such as one that I used to have. I guess it's safer to not exist. So I spent many years stuck behind my schizoid adaptations because I did not think it was safe to exist in the outer world. Other beliefs are like, if you tell people your needs, you will be abandoned, which is completely reality distortion, right? If you tell narcissistic, abusive people your needs, you will be abandoned. But if you tell healthy, empathic people your needs, it'll be fine, right? Because that's completely normal when you are not narcissistic. Or things like, this was another belief of mine. Look how distorted this is. I used to think, well, I guess it's better to be the abused than to be the abuser, because I kept finding myself in these horrible situations where friends, family members, boyfriends, and random people would constantly be taking advantage of me. And because I thought I would be a monster if I ever said no to someone or set a boundary, every time I was getting screwed over, I would be like, well, I guess it's better to be abused than to be the abuser, which is distorted thinking, right? It's better to learn how to protect myself and set boundaries and honor my perception of what's going on right then and there than it is to be the abused or to be the abuser, right? And another sign that you have been raised by narcissists is that you have trust issues. You have relationship issues. So I see this in like three great categories. Number one, you trust too easily. So magical thinking, toxic positivity, codependency. No, I don't see any red flags. Everything is fine. Everything is okay. And then you're constantly exposing yourself to destructive situations because you don't see the red flags. Or you don't trust anyone. You're paranoid. You know what I mean? You think you're the center of someone else's conspiracy plot. You think everyone is out to get you. You become aggressive and worried, right? And then the third group that I see are people who are hypersensitive to social interaction, and then they will just self-isolate. It's like more about thinking that they are not enough for the world, so I'm not going to try. And like they don't know how to deal with people, or they're not interesting enough to have friends or to be loved, so they just self-isolate. Woo! Okay, ladies and gents, that's what I wanted to say in this video. Guys, if you like this video, let me know. Give me your feedback. I know this is some painful stuff to talk about, but it's really important to me to know that maybe it's touched you or enlightened you in some way. So give me your feedback in the comments below. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Okay, ladies and gents, that's it for today. Thank you so much. See you next time.